Hi, Dr. Carol Blaney here. Today I am happy to share with you some of my thoughts on a new model that I developed that discusses 3 key neurotypes and discusses the skills that each one has and or lacks. The title of my talk is The Blaney 8-Pillar Model for 3 Key Human Neurotypes. And first, I will discuss the 3 key human neurotypes that I'll be focusing on today. The first one is the Asperger neurotype, which was coined in the 40s by Hans Aspergers when he noticed young professorial-like boys that discussed scientific topics at very young ages, and he called them the little professors. And then in the 90s, the term Asperger made it into the DSM-4, and it's not in the DSM-5 because it's now linked in with autism, as we all know. But so many people that have been diagnosed as Asperger's and have read a lot of the brain studies done specifically for the Asperger brain, we know that it is a neurotype. And so I will continue using that term because the term autism generally has a huge diversity, which would include people that don't talk or don't communicate. And I do not know very much about this neurotype, other than they possess a lot of genius capabilities because their attention goes into other domains other than human speech. But anyway, so I will be focusing on the Asperger as one of the key human neurotypes up for discussion today. The second neurotype is called Neurotypical, coined by the author of the book Pretending to be Normal. And that book was written by a female Asperger, and it was very well received by the public. And I think a lot of Aspergers that read that book relate, and that's on my list of reading that I would like to do. Now, the neurotypical, it's my understanding that she coined the term. If I'm wrong, it's possible that I'm wrong and she got it from somewhere else, but it really caught hold because, it means that you're neurologically typical as opposed to neurologically atypical. And it just means that you think like over 90 or 95% of the population. You act in expected ways, you tell expected jokes, you watch the expected TV shows, dress in the expected manner, you follow the expected customs of your land and follow the expected rules and laws. And you are very skilled at copying that culture so that you fit in and become, so to speak, a team player. Now, the third neurotype up for discussion today is a bit of a controversial category, but I'm going to label it psychopath. You might prefer the term sociopath, but I like psychopath for the following reasons. One is the psychopath is generally accepted as a neurotype that one is born with, that is a genotype. And the sociopath is often thought of as a similar acting human being, but one who has a normal genetic neurotype, a normal genetic genotype for their brain, but because of harsh childhood upbringing, trauma, and abuse, this human being grows up with many of the same characteristics of the psychopath, namely breaking the law and hurting others and stealing and so forth. And a lot of the psychopaths and sociopaths end up in prison. Now, a sociopath can be rehabilitated and actually become a good, caring individual because the sociopath still has the part of the brain that operates, that feels empathy for another human being, empathy and love. On the other hand, the psychopath does not possess functioning in the part of the human brain that feels empathy and love for another human being. The psychopath is not aware of this because what you don't know doesn't exist. And since the psychopath has no understanding or inclination to understand what it feels like to love another, then the psychopath doesn't look for anything that's missing because he doesn't know that anything is missing. It's like a fish in the water doesn't look for the air because all he knows is water, and he doesn't even know what water is because there's nothing to compare it to. So he just thinks that water is just existence. So the psychopath just accepts that he doesn't feel love and caring, and he doesn't miss it because he doesn't even know what it is. And when he hears other people talk about it, he calls it a weakness or a human frailty. So we will discuss these three neurotypes, and I will elucidate the characteristics of each one of these as I go through 8 key neurological skills that I have thought about for quite a long time. I've narrowed it down to 8 skills. I'll read the skills out first, and then I'll talk about how each neurotype has or lacks each of these skills so that we can then have a systematized view of these 3 key human neurotypes and better navigate our way through this complex web of diversity, knowing that these skills exist, and also have compassion for the neurotypes that lack certain skills that we have, whether you're an Asperger, a neurotypical, or a psychopath. So let's move to the skill sets. The first one is the skill of body language. That would be the ability to observe another person who's, let's just say they're talking, and you observe their eye movements, their pupil dilation, their eyebrow position, facial expressions in general, their body posture, their head tilt, their foot movement, everything they do visibly, and even with the tonality of their voice, you are able to read that person's fears, their emotions, and their intentions. In other words, that what neurotypicals call theory of mind, that would be in the category of theory of mind, is the ability to read someone's body language so that you can predict the intention and the desires of that human being. And the second skill is what I call group dynamics. This has some overlap with body language, but I'm distinguishing it because it includes, for example, in the corporate world, when you have a job and there's a boss and there's this hierarchical structure, the group dynamic skill includes the power games that are played in the corporate world, or the power games that are played in the high school and the middle school and even the elementary school and even in kindergarten. All the schools, there's a boss, there's the professor on top, and then the students, and in the middle is the TAs. There's the family group dynamics, the boss is the parents, and then you've got your babysitter who sort of doesn't have any clout, the kids who sort of feel powerful over the babysitter. And so there's a lot of group dynamics on our planet, and I just pointed out 3: the family, the corporate world, and also school, to give you an idea of what I mean by group dynamics. Sometimes group dynamics would include one-on-one communication, but generally it's with 3 or more people. The third skill is what I call mirror neurons. Now, that doesn't really sound like a skill, does it? But right now that's the working title of this skill because it reflects, first and foremost, what scientists have discovered exists in humans, mirror neurons. Now, personally, I don't know if these are particular neurons that exist in a certain place or if this is just a term they give for the phenomenon that when you observe someone fall and hurt their knee, and that's happened to you before, then observing someone fall elicits in you about 10% of your mirror neurons, according to the papers I've read. 10% of your mirror neurons might fire and then give you the sensation of the bad feeling that it feels like to fall and hurt your knee, because you might cringe, go, oh, or when a man watches another man get kicked in the balls, his body physically tightens because he's most men, that's happened to them sooner or later in life. You get damaged in the balls, you fall down or whatever, and so the man will see another man get hit in the balls, and he'll cringe and go, that's mirror neurons firing. Women don't typically feel that because we don't have the ability to know what it feels like to get kicked in the balls, because women do not have balls. So the woman will have more of a affective empathy when they see it, because they know logically that it's very painful, because they see all the other men around cringing. So, they deduct it. Now, when a woman sees her child fall and get seriously injured, she then might have a similar reaction to a man who cringes when another man's balls get hurt. She'll cringe because she's still connected to her child in many, many ways that I won't go into. She'll feel surges of pain in her body. And some people are more apt to do this than others, which we'll get into when we talk about which neurotypes have more and stronger mirror neuron processes than other neurotypes. So that would be kind of the ability to physically feel the emotional pain or pleasure of another. We call that skill mirror neurons. That's the third skill. Moving on then to the fourth skill. I call this skill the ability or the automatic tendency to love your tribe. And this comes from, all of these actually come from ancient skills and functions that we had to have to survive. And they're all wonderful. They all give pleasure. They all give surges of dopamine and other pleasure chemicals, because that's the purpose of them, is to help us survive. And the things we do that help us survive make us feel good, like eat food and have procreation and gain power. All these things help us to survive, and they feel good. Loving the tribe. Now, this used to just mean the immediate family. Then, as tribes came together to form multiple families in one unit, it was loving that tribe, the larger tribe, the team. And in today's world, this would be reflected in loving your family, your extended family, and maybe the people like you, and not necessarily loving them, but loving us. So if you're, like one time I worked for a company that everybody in the company had to love the Braves if you wanted to be a team player on that company. And if you didn't love the Braves, you better have a really good reason, and you better be really playful about it. So the president came in, and he couldn't deny that he loved his home team, which is another red team from somewhere or whatever. But he always joked about it and made fun, and it was a good thing. He turned it into a good thing by cajoling his audience when he gave his end of the year cost projections. He would always open with some joke about his team versus everyone else's Braves. And so anyway, that's all about loving your tribe and following certain rules, like liking sports. He liked sports just like everyone else liked sports. And that was part of loving the tribe and fitting in and doing what everyone else does and wanting to be appreciated. But it also includes not loving them, which is not the Braves. Not like people that didn't like sports were excluded from that little team. And in this world, we have so many divisions, and you just pick any division, and that's a sign of the, lower evolved trait of loving your tribe. It's a bit narrow-minded when you think that you're better than any other country, or your race is better than others, or your religion is better than others. And it's all of these lead to this wonderful trait that got us to survive by sticking together is now what causes divisiveness and hatred, exclusion, and wars, and the inability to see the other person's point of view, and the escalation of, retribution. All right, so moving on. The next skill is, I call world equals self. Now, let me explain what that means. I can see I might have to revise some of these titles. But for today, world equals self. That's a mathematical equation. And this is the ability, and all of these skills are what people are born with. If you're born with a skill, I'm going to say this neurotype is born with this skill. This neurotype is born with this skill. Some neurotypes are born with the skill of seeing the world as the self. These are the people like Jesus that never hated, or people like Buddha that they understood that every man was equal. The Dalai Lama says that all men are equal and that they all want happiness. Everybody wants happiness. And a lot of people are born with this ability, and they don't understand why someone can possibly step on a bug and not care, because they just automatically care about stepping on bugs. And, well, I'll just have a little diversion. One time, someone I know that I loved very much stepped on my pet caterpillar and squished it. And I was extremely upset. I mean, in that person's eyes, I was insane, because it's just a caterpillar. I mean, what? Just a bug? And you're crying? I wasn't crying. I was in a rage, because that was my pet. And I had bonded with it, and I loved all caterpillars. They turned into butterflies. What do you know? And people that rescue pets, these people have a little bit of that in them, or maybe a lot. And people that don't follow the conventions, and they just see people of every color and every religion as just a human, another sentient being, just like all the animals. They don't like to eat meat because why would I want to kill a cow? I mean, I just don't get it. That kind of mentality. So that is the skill of seeing the world as the self, the ability to realize that all sentient beings just want happiness and no one is better than the other. Any sense of being better than is a made-up, view that you made up in your own mind. There's no inherent reality to any of that. So we're all equal, that skill. Now, this is a bit tied to the next skill, number 6, which I call free of convention, because you can't really love everyone equally to yourself if you're not free of convention. So one sort of dictates the other, or allows the other. So 6 would be necessary condition of 5. Free of convention, number 6, would be a necessary condition of world equals self, number 5. Because if you're not free of convention, then you wouldn't have any problem with eating meat, because everybody else eats meat, and you're not free of convention. In fact, you're trapped in the conventional rules of the day. So your mother ate meat, your father ate meat, and the cow dies, but everyone eats meat, so the cow must not be important. So you follow the convention and you eat meat, and thus you aren't seeing the world equals self. So people that have no qualms about eating meat, they don't have any sympathy for the animal, those are the people that are not free of convention. But there are a group of people that are free of convention, and these are the people that are not limited by the social norms. For example, people that really deep down don't care about fashion. I mean, they might follow the fashion because they're doing it for ulterior motives, like to not be bullied. They want to protect themselves, so they wear what they have to wear to be safe. So they work hard to learn the fashions and try to fit in so they won't be hurt, So, but they're not limited by the social norms. They don't assume that a scientific equation that they were taught in school is true. So now we know what free of convention means, not limited by social norms. This also goes in the physics culture. Those that are free of convention in physics are often ostracized, and their ideas are never heard. And these aren't my words. This is just something that was discussed by Lynn McTaggart when she was talking about physicists with new ideas. Typically, they might even get published, but it might be 50 years before their ideas actually take hold, because the majority of the world is neurotypical, and they're bound by convention, as we'll see when we discuss which neurotypes have which skill. Well, that was skill number 6, free of convention. Should call it freedom from convention. Then it's more of a noun. Now, 7. I've got 2 more to go here. 7 is a skill called systemetizer. You're good at being a systematizer. And in fact, you are actually a hyper-systematizer. People that aren't good at systematizing, when they see someone that is good at systematizing, they call that person a hyper-systematizer. When in fact, the systematizer is just normally good at it. You know, they're not really hyper in any way, but the people that aren't good at it think it's hyper-systematization. Because kind of like, okay, let's see, I'm terrible at playing piano. So when I hear someone really good, I say, oh my God, they're a genius, oh my God. They're not really a genius. They just worked hard at it. They might be an awesome artist. They may not really have an IQ over whatever genius is, over 140, I think it is. So the same goes with hyper. So some people are very good at systematization. Scientists are often very good at this. In fact, you have to be, because a lot of the classes that you take demand that you are able to systematize. Now, the last skill and eighth skill is something that might be a bit controversial to people that haven't read a broad time span of literature on the subject in the last 125 years. A skill that I call HSP / senses electromagnetic fields. Now, we know that regular people, meaning neurotypicals, the majority of us, can't feel electromagnetic fields because they laugh at the thought of even mentioning it. It's like a joke to them. But people that can feel electromagnetic fields, when they talk among themselves, they almost have like a secret language, a private language. They understand what each other feel because it's a matter of sharing an ability. So when two people that love sports get together and they talk about sports, they share an ability to appreciate sports. And people that don't appreciate sports, when they look at that, they think it's kind of crazy. Because it's like, why do they care so much about sports? I just don't get it. Well, okay, in the same sense, two people that appreciate and understand and experience the feeling of being able to sense electromagnetic fields, which I'll explain in a minute, when they get together and talk, they have a mutual understanding of something that is inaccessible to the majority of the people. So when they get together and discuss it, it gives further credence to the fact that it exists. Now, on a scientific basis, the people that can sense electromagnetic fields, I am hypothesizing that these are the group of people called highly sensitive persons. And that's like a acronym, HSP, that's fairly popular. I'm sure maybe half of the people listening have heard of it. HSP, oh, I'm an HSP. You know, that means you're really sensitive to either, your senses are sensitive. It's like your volume is turned way loud to receiving data. So I've always known that I was an HSP. And when someone called it that and labeled it and told me what it was, I was like, oh, of course I am. I smell things more than anyone else. I can taste a metallic taste in something for a week after I take a pill that has a metallic element in it. No one else can even understand me when I say that I can still taste that taste. If I eat garlic, I just can taste it for 3 days afterwards. And even smell it on my fingers. I can hear the fluorescent bulbs whining in Walmart, and it makes me nauseous and irritable, and like I want to get out. I'm just like, I have a panic attack because it's like sounds so terrible, like a fingernail scratching on the blackboard. Now, neurotypical, all the main regular people all understand that scratching a finger on the blackboard hurts your ears. I'm pretty sure everyone hates that sound. They don't have blackboards anymore, but any person that's ever heard that sound knows that it's torture. So that's how many sounds and smells and touchy things that touch your skin are for highly sensitive people. Highly sensitive people also can have digestive troubles because they are so sensitive. Their nervous system tends to overreact. And these people do very well and in fact are designed to live in a natural environment in quiescent nature. The ability to sense electromagnetic fields is hypothesized by me and others to be caused by the fact that we have metal elements in our body, and metal elements react very strongly to electromagnetic fields, and just like compasses do. And it's well known that birds navigate via the electromagnetic fields of the earth with metallic particles in their head. And I believe they're iron, but it might be manganese or something. It's some metal, okay? Well, humans have metals in their body too, so you could hypothesize that it is caused by that. Another hypothesis, and it could be all of these, or a grouping of these, another hypothesis is that our most conductive tissue in our body, and the tissue that is linked to acupuncture, as described by the author Dr. Daniel Keown, Keown, in his book The Spark in the Machine. He westernizes acupuncture by explaining that the fascia, the tissue in our body that is the fascia, the connective tissue, is what carries the electrical currents that are the main phenomenon of acupuncture. And that is the phenomenon that electrical currents can communicate almost instantaneously across the body. So we've got the fascia, we've got the metals in our body, and then our scientists of late, I would say in the last 50 years, have measured humans communicate to each other through space in this way. So if you have, like, say, a husband and wife that are close, they're close people, and you move them into separate rooms that are electrically insulated from one another, and one person is upset by, say, seeing a series of photos, and then a horrific photo shows up of something that I don't want to mention because it's like horrific, then the other person, their gut will respond with electrical impulses in the same instant in time. That's just one example of a test. So there's the gut neurons that are picking this up. Then there's another test where people, let's see, they're about 10 feet away. I don't think they have to be close. They could be strangers. But you can take two people and have them be 10 feet away or closer. And when one person's heart rate changes, those changes will be picked up in their brain. Or whatever the state of the heartbeat is of one person, that rhythm, those properties show up in the brain waves of a person up to 10 feet away, and probably further. It's just that our instruments can't measure that. And the things that the person's brainwave picks up could be beats per minute and could be heart rate variability. These are all characteristics of the heartbeat pattern that reveal a person's excitement level and their calmness or their mood. And this has actually been done, is being done at the HeartMath Institute. And this would not only include the biological state of a loved one or a stranger, it would extend to people in crowds, and also to more than just people, animals, and also to electromagnetic fields from technology such as transformers, our computer, underground water lines, and maybe the worst culprit of all is what's called dirty electricity, which is a scientific term that means if you've got a lot of houses pulling current from a main power source, and every house has random switches going on and off, that affects everyone else's power input. And so no current is ever completely steady. It's just kind of got this chaotic pattern going on that's superimposed on top of a normal AC current. And that chaotic electromagnetic pattern that we're all exposed to, I think some people can feel that. And that's why when you go far away in nature, I hypothesize that I can finally relax and feel kind of myself. And whenever I'm in a city, I'm always on edge. I can never really fully relax until I escape the city and go as far away as I can from any dirty electricity, power lines, and radio towers. So it's a scary thought to me that the world is shrinking and there's fewer and fewer places where you can do this. Maybe one day the only place will be the oceans where you can actually escape from dirty electricity and also all the dirty microwaves coming at us from cell phones that are bombarding our entire biosphere. So now the second half of my discussion and presentation of this model, this 8-pillar model, will be to share how each one of the 3 key human neurotypes possesses this set of 8 skills. And the 8 skills are the 8 pillars. These are the pillars that make us who we are in terms of our personality. So let's start with the Asperger. They do not possess the skill to read body language. And that is why they often don't pick up cues. Now, it's always a spectrum, and some Aspergers have 0 skill at this, and these are, if you divide Aspergers into the 3 common groups, there's the outcasts, which are the most different people, and these may be the people that can't even get body language at all because they're from galaxies so far away in their past life. My little endearing reincarnation theory. They're from galaxies so far away that they can't even imagine what it means to frown. There's just no connection at all to the human body language patterns. And they have different ones. Like they might grimace their face when they're happy. So it's just a very different wiring that they have. Now then there's the loner Aspies, which are sort of the run-of-the-mill Aspie that are often bullied, and they usually develop a hard chip on their shoulder because they're tired of being bullied, And they stop looking at you, and therefore they stop reading your body language. But they might have some skill. And then there's kind of like me, just half Asperger, half neurotypical, and we have most of the Asperger skills, but for some reason we seem to manage to get along with the neurotypicals. It's just that it drains us so much because we have to process so much, to try to figure out this different culture. And so all in all, the Aspies lack the skill to read body language, some more than others. Now, I can read body language actually pretty well, and when I take tests for body language skill, I actually surpass the norm, but that's because I'm hyper paying attention. Like I can pay attention really well and notice nuances. But that's part of my skill. And also I have to read the body language, and I process it in a much different way than other people. So I may not know what the body language is saying right then and there, but an hour later I'll figure it out. So it's not really usually in real time. But if I say watch a movie, I can figure out all the body language. So the body language skill is missing in the Asperger, but it's present in both the neurotypical and the psychopath. And in fact, they are so good at it, the psychopath is so good at it that he can manipulate you based on your body language because he can read what your intentions are and he can act on that. Okay, moving on to group dynamics. Aspie's skill in group dynamics is usually less than 0. And I think all of the Aspergers are low in this skill because the group dynamics is based on a survival mechanism and a pre-programmed software in the brain that is just basically lacking in the Asperger. I would hypothesize that there's like a capsule or something in the brain or some pattern that's imprinted when that baby's born, and it's just there. You don't have to try. You just get it. You just understand about hierarchy. But since it's not really a moral thing, the Aspie will cringe at group dynamics and political hierarchies because it's so immoral. Like all people are equal. That's a later skill I'll discuss, but the Aspies are the people with the skill of seeing the world as self. So they see the group dynamics of the neurotypicals as highly immoral. And yet the neurotypicals take it for granted as the truth. So group dynamics is very, very, very polarized as a skill. Aspies lack it, the neurotypicals have it, and the psychopaths also have it. The neurotypical has the skill of group dynamics because they have that pre-programmed software when they're born, which I use as a metaphor, and they just get it. They understand about hierarchy, and they do what they have to do to survive in their chosen spot, or I guess given spot in the hierarchy, and they do what they have to do to survive. And the psychopath's same thing. And the psychopath will, again, use that to his advantage to gain. So let's move on to the mirror neurons. Of course, we know the psychopath has no mirror neurons because I've said it several times in this talk already. The neurotypical has mirror neurons. About 10% of his mirror neurons fire when he sees someone fall and get hurt. And the neurotypical has fallen and gotten hurt in that exact same way. If you see something happen to someone and it's never happened to you, your mirror neurons are not going to fire. And if that has happened to you and it happens to someone else, your mirror neurons will typically fire and you'll feel that pain. And the Asperger, I'm going to step out on a limb here and hypothesize, really assert that, Aspergers have 100% of their neurons are mirror neurons. So if I see my son fall, I feel more pain than my son. I mean, literally, I do. My body writhes in pain when I see my son fall down when he was a little boy. Even now, like that, I can't even look at him if he mentions that he hurt himself. I feel a surge of pain go through my body from my head to my toes, and it's very, very painful. So and I used to say, oh, that's because I'm a HSP, a highly sensitive person. And it is tied to that. That's what makes Asperger's highly sensitive persons. And another reason why I'm not including autistics in this, because I don't know what the skills of the autistics are. I think it's too varied. You can't really say any one way, but Asperger's are more studied and more categorizable, especially that their left temporal lobe has been seen to be predictably open to let in all sensory data, or almost all. So that's why we're overloaded with sensory data, because we're letting it all in and we're choosing what we want to look at, as opposed to our pre-programmed tribal software telling us what to look at. Neurotypicals and psychopaths, they're being told what to look at, and they only see what they see. They only see what their pre-programmed software tells them to look at. Nothing else exists to them. But the Asperger sees it all, and then their conscious, logical mind decides what's important. And that's where a lot of the great science emerges from that trait. Now, where are we? We're at mirror neurons. The fourth skill, loving your tribe. I will say that this is a neurotypical skill. This is a neurotypical pre-programmed ability to love your tribe. And I'm going to say that the psychopath lacks this because they're not able to love anyone. They don't feel love and they don't feel compassion. So, and they're not evil as much as they are unable to do it because that part of their brain is asleep. Their MRIs show that psychopaths have the part of the brain that is universally expressed as empathy. It fires when people are feeling empathetic thoughts. Theirs never fires. The neurons are constantly asleep. And perhaps for the sociopaths, the childhood abuse that caused them to never feel empathy was a survival mechanism. So they somehow forced that region of the brain to shut off. But again, I digress. I'm trying to develop compassion for all people, including evil psychopaths. So I want to just point that out. It helps us understand it. And if you understand something, you're less afraid of it. And perhaps hate it less. So if we can eliminate hatred and replace that with understanding, that's what leads to compassion and fruitful negotiations. Now, the neurotypical is born with the ability to love their tribe. It's automatic. And you might want to say, well, if it's automatic, it doesn't really worth that much because it's just automatic. So it's not like you chose it. But here's the thing is, even if a mother automatically loves her baby, it's still beautiful. I mean, nature's beautiful. A yellow rose fully in bloom is beautiful and breathtaking. Doesn't mean the rose had to intend that it be beautiful. It just is, and that's a beautiful thing. So, the Aspie. Let's look at Aspie. Does the Aspie love his tribe? Well, I assert that he does. And the reason he or she does love his tribe is they're born to love their tribe. They just don't react the same way. Because gazing into the eyes of your mother is not wired into the Aspie. But loving your mother is, I assert. It's just that the Aspie is so overwhelmed with the mother cooing at him and the fly buzzing over there on the wall doing an interesting pattern that the Aspie may choose to look at that fly because he doesn't know that it's wrong to look away from his mother's gaze because he's just a baby. So he'll just look innocently at the fly and be amazed by it while he's enjoying his mother cooing at him and he's feeling so loved. So that's just an example of why I believe that Aspies were born with the ability to love their tribe and the tendency to do that. However, if that Aspie is bullied enough, he will learn to not love his tribe. And I've seen this over and over, where the parents are constantly trying to change the basic nature of their child and give them drugs and, make them change and quit. You have to go to school and do what everyone else does, and you have to do this, and the Aspie just doesn't want to, and so they get mad at him and punish him. Those Aspies are going to learn to not love their tribe. Because how can you love someone that treats you so mean? It's just not natural. It's like when Jesus says love your enemies, most people laughed at that. Like, how can you love your enemies? I don't think Jesus really said that. I think he said, forgive your enemies, for they know not what they do. Because the psychopaths don't know what they do, because they don't even know what empathy and love is. Well, so loving your tribe is natural for the Aspie, but he can learn to not love his tribe. That's why I have a plus, and the minus is in parentheses, because that means you can learn to not love your tribe. But you automatically love your tribe when you're born. So parents, just let that be a reminder. If you have a little Aspie child, remember, you don't want to teach him to not love you. You want to nurture that love. Look for it, because it's there. Now, and I think all parents who have Aspies do eventually realize this. Now, the fifth skill, world as self. The Aspies are born with this trait. And I probably don't need to say much about it since I've already talked about it a lot. We Aspies love the world. We want to save the world because we don't want to see it get hurt. We can't stand it when we see a tree dying because of pollution, or the animals losing their home because of humans raping the land. So, we almost feel indignant when such injustices are done, and to a fault, to a literal fault. The Neurotypicals are not born with this trait because they're born with loving the tribe trait exclusively, and their software tells them to not love the outsiders or at least to fear them because they could hurt you, which used to be the case and maybe still is. But the Neurotypicals can learn to love the world as self by being spiritual people in whatever method they choose. And people that meditate and do compassion meditation is probably the fastest way to learn experientially to love the world as self and to become that. You practice a thought pattern and you ingrain it so deeply in your neurons that fire together so that they'll wire together, because nerves that fire together wire together. The psychopath cannot learn to love the world as self because the psychopath doesn't even know how to love his own tribe, because the psychopath has no mirror neurons and no feelings of empathy or love, because the part of his brain that feels that is asleep or dead or absent. The fact that the Aspie is born with the world equals self skill leads them to want to work very hard to solve world problems and better the world. And the Aspies that have learned to not love their tribe typically don't lose the automatic trait of loving the world as self, but it is possible. So if you have an outcast Aspie who just basically hates the whole world, including his own family, it's from being bullied because they're so different, and being told that you're worthless when you know deep down that you're worth something. But if the whole world tells you you're worthless, you telling yourself that you're worth something because you logically believe it doesn't really cut it, because you're all alone and you have no one to talk to, And so you might escape the world and go live among the animals and be very happy, but you still hate the world and you hate your family. So that's a very sad situation to be in, which is why we should eradicate bullying. Well, the sixth skill is freedom from convention. Guess who is free from convention? Right, the Aspie, completely free from convention. One of their skills that they're born with. Conventions only should exist in the Aspie mind if they make sense. And maybe all conventions made sense at one time. But times change, and putting your elbows on the table is no longer really a relevant sin because our elbows are clean. Back in the day when someone invented that rule, maybe people came in from the farm and their elbows were covered with mud, so you don't put them on the table. Well, neurotypicals are not skilled in freedom of convention. They are, in fact, bound by convention, which pretty much defines them as neurotypicals. Because since all neurotypicals follow the rules, then they must be bound by convention. So most neurotypicals will get the conventional haircuts, the conventional eyeglasses, the conventional clothes that match everyone else's. And the Aspie, if they want to look normal, they have to work really hard at it. They have to maybe hire a fashion designer to do their wardrobe and help them hold their face a certain way and take speech lessons and learn how to talk more slowly or more quickly. The psychopath, the reason I have a question mark here is it's tempting to say that the psychopath is bound by convention, but I believe that the psychopath is only bound by convention in that it gets him what he wants. But he's not bound by convention in the same way that the neurotypical is. The neurotypical thinks that convention is reality. And so if a neurotypical is brought up in a certain religion, deep down they'll always believe that religion is the best way and the only way. As I've noticed in a few neurotypicals, that's just one example. It's like that's a good expression of the neurotypical trait. Whereas the psychopath, he won't care one way or the other about the religion, but he might follow it because he knows that it makes him look good, and then people will trust him, and then he can manipulate them for his own gain. Again, the psychopath lives based on gaining power. He's the video gamer guy. The neurotypical is the Joe Schmo average guy that follows all the rules and fits in with everyone else and is a team player. And then the Asperger is the out-of-the-box weirdo that absolutely the opposite of fitting in, that nobody wants to associate with them because it'll make them look bad. Okay, so I insulted all three neurotypes, but I could also compliment all three neurotypes, which I will proceed to do now. The Asperger is the person that saves the world, the Einsteins, the Bill Gates, the Teslas, and the Newtons, the Apple, Newton, gravitation, Let's see. The neurotypicals are the solid bricks that hold the world together, and we couldn't live without them, and that's a fact. We sure need the neurotypicals to keep us on the planet. Of course, the neurotypicals need the Aspies to save the neurotypicals from self-destruction. So that's even why I'm here at all, is I'm just trying to... My bottom line in talking about this at all is, hello, we Aspies are guardians of the earth, and we're here to save ourselves. So neurotypicals, I know we're kind of weird, but if you could just see what we're here for, you could probably let us help you, because we want to help you, because that's why we're here. But if you're going to be mean to us, it's going to be really hard for us to like you. But if you're just nice enough to us, we really want to help. So please include us, and we will work very, very hard. All right. Next on the list of skills, systematizer. The Aspies have one skill that outshines all the others, and that's their hypersystematizer skill. They love to systematize things. They take in data, and they love to analyze it and make systems. And that's why Einstein was able to develop the special theory and the general theory of relativity, because he systematized all the knowledge and contemplated it for years and years and never gave up. I should add to this trait systematizer and perseverance. Yes, Aspies will persevere, especially if you let them. You don't fire them. You let them persevere. They will continue working on the problem until it's solved, and they will never stop. Einstein persevered in finding the unification theory until he passed away. Neurotypicals are less of systematizers than the Aspies, but some of them are better than others. And in general, the male neurotypicals are better at systematizing than the female neurotypicals, and the female neurotypicals have better social skills than the male neurotypicals. The female neurotypicals have more empathy than the male neurotypicals because that was required to raise the children and to know when the baby was hungry or in pain. The male's skill of systematization of the neurotypicals helped them to organize the hunt. The psychopath is not very good at systematizing because he has developed his ability to read body language and read group dynamics to such a high level that the white matter in his brain is a lot more, occupies a lot more volume than other people, other neurotypes. And because of that, he has less gray matter. So he's not very smart and it doesn't have much volume. And there's a relationship between how big your brain is, how many neurons there are, and how many interconnections there are, thus how much intelligence there is. So the psychopath, because of his high level of white matter coming from his high skills of body language and group dynamics, he doesn't have much room to systematize. So there you go. He's going to screw up eventually. Now, the smart psychopathic CEOs will have such a good team of people that it doesn't turn out to be a problem if all goes well. The last skill I will discuss, the last and eighth pillar of neuro skills, is called HSP, highly sensitive persons, and the skill is the sense of being able to read electromagnetic fields. This person can sense electromagnetic fields, and the Asperger, I assert, has this at extremely high levels, which is why I have 2 pluses instead of 1. Same with systematizing. They both get 2 pluses instead of 1 because they're so high. And the ability to sense electromagnetic fields is very high in the Asperger because all of their sensory input channels are on maximum volume because that left temporal lobe is letting in all the data and nothing is turned away. So a lot of data is coming in all at once. Now, if you're alone in nature and all you're doing is focusing on writing one symphony, this is a great skill because you can see so much more in that one symphony than any other human being could see, except for maybe another Aspie. You have a sense called thinking. You know, you got your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears, your touch, and then you have your thinking sense. You can sense yourself thinking. So sensing our thoughts, if you're left isolated and alone in nature with no interruptions, especially from other humans, you will have an enormous ability to put all your attention on the millions of thoughts that are in your mind and be so mindful of every tiny little thought that you have. And if you focus it on your symphony that you're creating, you could create a masterpiece with multiple layers and levels of intricacy and harmony. The neurotypical typically does not have this skill, which is why they're all rolling their eyes right now, because they don't understand. In the same sense that a colorblind person doesn't know that he's colorblind until he's told. When you give special glasses to a colorblind person, which cuts out some of the frequencies so that they can distinguish between red and green, and they put them on, they start crying in joy because they couldn't ever see the colors before. Now they can. And they're like, oh my God, all my life I've missed out on colors. Now I'm seeing colors. Well, neurotypicals, I'm telling you that if you could sense electromagnetic fields, you wouldn't be laughing right now. But since you can't sense them, you think it's, maybe you think it's insane or ridiculous or whatever, but I can sense them. And what I feel is when I'm in bad electromagnetic fields or, okay, let me just give an example. Yeah, when I am sitting next to someone that is upset, and I'm not upset, but I'm sitting next to someone that's upset, I can feel a stabbing pain in my stomach, or I'll start getting a panic attack or something. And as soon as I leave that person, it goes away. And, a lifetime of this, I know what I'm talking about because I've done a controlled experiment thousands of times, and it's just consistent. Same with if I'm in a crowd of upset people, like at work, where people don't want to be there, and then I leave and go to a empty place in nature, I sense the beauty of the quiet so intently, and every cell of my body can sense the quietness. Whereas in the crowded, yucky room where everyone's in a bad mood, like waiting in line at the driver's license place, every cell in my body feels, since there's no word for it, because it's not really integrated into our culture, feels a sense of ick, and it's like screaming to leave. So it's an all over pervasive body feeling. And when I'm next to someone that's calm and not has no ill intentions towards me, and they're focused on their own work, I feel completely peaceful. But if that person suddenly remembers a bad memory or whatever, I'll feel that. So the Asperger has a ability to sense electromagnetic fields of people and electronic equipment and geomagnetic storms. The neurotypicals, for the most part, lack this ability. However, on a subconscious level, they may be able to feel it, as indicated by the fact that when geomagnetic storms are active, a lot of people get headaches and anxiety and things like that. Positive ions can also cause feelings of anxiety, well documented for decades. The psychopath has no ability to sense electromagnetic fields. All right, this is the end of my discussion of the Blaney 8-pillar model of 3 key human neurotypes and their 8 skill sets. Well, thank you for listening, and so if you're still with me, thank you for your interest, and I would, since you've been here this long, I beg you to leave feedback, because I would love to hear somebody tell me that I missed a key skill. If you think I missed kinesthetic skill, I didn't miss that. I purposely left that out because any of these neurotypes can have that skill. And it's also not really a neuro skill. It's, yes, the nerves control our body motions, but this is more thinking, the thinking skills. And that's more of a body movement skill. So if you beg to differ and think I should include that skill, please tell me why, and how would you rate the Asperger, the neurotypical, and or the psychopath with that skill. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that, or any other thoughts you have, any questions, any thing you disagree with, or, if you're an Aspie and you absolutely lack an electromagnetic field skill, I would like to hear what your evidence is that you lack it, that sort of thing. Thanks so much, and I wish you well, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and peace.